Go back to Africa where you belong. The words hit the air at Gate 22 of Chicago O'Hare Airport like a fist through glass. Sharp, deliberate, designed to wound. It was 7:14 in the morning. The terminal was alive with the ordinary sounds of a Tuesday. Rolling suitcases scraping against tile, the hiss of a coffee machine, the flat voice of an overhead announcement calling final boarding for a flight to Denver. People were mid-sentence, mid-sip, mid-thought, and then those 6 words cut through every single one of them and brought the whole terminal to a standstill. Every head turned, not slowly, not reluctantly. All at once, the way people move when something happens that they know they will remember. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. A teenager with headphones pulled one ear free. A mother with a stroller stopped walking and looked up. 2 businessmen in nearly identical gray suits turned from their phones at the same moment, faces tight with the recognition that something had just crossed a line that most people spend their whole lives pretending does not exist. The man who had spoken those words stood at the entrance to the boarding lane for Flight 847 Atlanta-bound. His name was Derek Fowler, 52 years old, and he was not whispering. He never whispered. Men like Derek Fowler had spent decades speaking at full volume in every room they entered, and it had always worked for them, which was precisely why he had never developed the instinct to stop. He was well-dressed in the way that expensive suits make a man look important rather than attractive. A charcoal blazer over a pressed white shirt, a corporate badge hanging from his neck on a lanyard that read, Meridian Pharmaceutical Group Regional Sales Director. His silver watch caught the terminal light every time he moved his hand. His shoes were Italian. His carry-on was monogrammed. Every detail about Derek Fowler said, I belong here, and everyone else needs to prove it. He was pointing. His finger extended like an accusation aimed directly at a woman standing 4 feet in front of him in the boarding lane. She was a black woman. 44 years old, though she looked younger. She wore a simple navy blazer over a white shirt, dark jeans, and clean white sneakers. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She carried a single small leather bag and a tablet tucked under one arm. There was nothing flashy about her. Nothing that announced status or wealth or power. She looked to a man like Derek Fowler, like someone who did not belong. That assessment was the worst mistake he had ever made in his life. Her name was Naomi Adeyemi, and she did not step back. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She did not look around for help the way some people do when they are humiliated in public and they hope that someone else will save them. She stood completely still, shoulders back, chin-level eyes steady, and she absorbed his words the way a stone wall absorbs rain. Not because the words did not land. They did. They always did. But Naomi Adeyemi had spent 25 years learning exactly what to do with that landing, and it was not what Derek Fowler expected. The small pilot's pin on her lapel caught the light as she exhaled. Nobody in the terminal could have known what that pin meant. Nobody in that boarding lane could have known that the woman Derek Fowler had just told to go back to Africa was at this very moment the reason their plane existed. Nobody could have known that within the next 2 hours she would be sitting not in seat 1A but in the captain's chair of the aircraft they were all about to board. The aircraft that bore her name on every filing, every certificate, every FAA registration document in existence. But they were going to find out. The circle of witnesses grew without anyone deciding to grow it. It just happened the way it always does when something real occurs in a public place. People drawn in by the gravity of a moment that is too significant to look away from. A young man in a gray hoodie and backpack lowered himself slowly from a seat near the window. A woman in a sharp blazer and practical flats paused mid-step. An elderly gentleman folded his newspaper deliberately and set it on the armrest beside him. Phones began to rise. Not all at once. A few at first, then more quietly, instinctively, the way people reach for documentation when they understand that what they are witnessing is something that needs to be preserved. Derek Fowler's face was flushed with the confidence of a man who had never once been held accountable in a room full of people watching. He had built a 20-year career on the certainty that his volume would always be louder than anyone else's authority. He had said what he said. Now he was waiting for the result he expected for this woman to shrink to apologize for existing in the wrong place to pick up her bag and find somewhere more appropriate to stand. Instead, Naomi looked at him. Not through him, not past him, at him, with the steady, unblinking attention of someone who had spent a lifetime cataloging exactly this kind of man in exactly this kind of moment. Her silence was working harder than his noise. The airport security guard 20 feet away shifted his weight from one foot to the other. The gate agent behind the desk glanced up from her screen. 2 flight attendants walking past with rolling bags slowed without stopping. Everyone felt it. The particular electricity that fills a space when a moment of reckoning is building, when the distance between what someone thinks will happen and what is actually about to happen is closing fast. Naomi Adeyemi adjusted the lapel of her navy blazer. She did not speak, not yet, because she had learned something in 25 years of navigating rooms that were not built for her skies, that were not meant for her, and industries that had done everything in their power to make her believe she did not belong. The right moment to speak was never the first one. Derek Fowler was pointing at a woman he knew nothing about. He saw jeans and sneakers and a small bag and a face that his entire life experience had told him did not belong at the front of a first-class boarding lane. He saw an inconvenience, a problem, something to be resolved in his favor as things always were. He did not see the 4 gold stripes waiting in a garment bag at the other end of the jet bridge. He did not see the aircraft beyond the window gleaming on the tarmac bearing the logo of a company that bore her fingerprints on every bolt. He did not see any of it. And that precise catastrophic blindness was exactly what was about to change everything. Before we go any further, have you ever been told you do not belong somewhere? Have you ever been dismissed, talked over, pushed aside by someone who made an instant decision about you based on nothing but how you looked? And have you ever stayed quiet? Not because you had nothing to say, but because you already knew something they did not. Drop your city in the comments right now. We want to hear from you, because in a few minutes the woman standing in that boarding lane is going to walk into a cockpit, and the man who just told her to go back to Africa is going to be sitting in seat 2A, somewhere between Chicago and Atlanta, putting the pieces together one terrifying search at a time. If this story is already stopping you in your tracks, hit that subscribe button and give us a like. Stories like this one deserve to be heard. Now let's rewind. 45 minutes back to where this morning actually started. It began the way most significant mornings do, quietly. No camera crew, no announcement, no assistant carrying a garment bag and a briefcase. Just a woman stepping through the automatic doors of Terminal 3 at O'Hare at 6:29 in the morning. Alone, moving at the unhurried pace of someone who knew exactly where she was going and had no reason to rush. The terminal was already busy. Families with too much luggage clustered near the check-in kiosks. A group of college students sprawled across rows of chairs, half-asleep, bags piled at their feet. Business travelers moved through the crowd in straight lines, eyes forward, earphones in the practiced locomotion of people who had done this so many times that airports had become something between a commute and a habit. Nobody looked at the woman in the navy blazer and white sneakers. Nobody noticed the small pilot's pin on her lapel. Nobody paused to wonder who she was. That anonymity was not an accident. It was, in fact, the entire point. Her name was Naomi Adeyemi, and she had chosen this morning with the same precision she brought to every decision that mattered. 44 years old, born in Houston to a Yoruba father who drove a school bus and a mother who worked the overnight shift at a hospital laundry. The youngest of 3 children, and the only one who had ever looked up at a plane crossing the sky and felt something that was not wonder. It was recognition. Like she was already supposed to be there, and the plane was just reminding her. She wore what she always wore when she traveled without wanting to be recognized. A simple navy blazer, clean white shirt, dark jeans, white sneakers. A small leather bag on one shoulder. A tablet tucked under her other arm. Nothing that said money, nothing that said power, nothing that would cause a gate agent to straighten up or a fellow passenger to say, "Oh, I know who you are." On the left lapel of her blazer, just above her heart, was a small gold pin in the shape of a set of wings. Most people who noticed it would assume it was decorative, a piece of jewelry, maybe a souvenir. They would be wrong. It was the same pin she had received from her flight instructor on the day she soloed for the first time at 19 years old in a single-engine Cessna over the flatlands of central Texas. She had worn it every time she flew ever since. Not for luck, for memory. Naomi pulled out her phone and opened the message thread with her assistant, Camille Torres. Camille was 31, sharp as a filed edge, and had been working with Naomi for 4 years. She was currently at the Atlanta office at her desk before 7 in the morning because that was simply who she was. Systems are live. Protocol Naomi is staged, waiting on your signal. Naomi typed back. "Stand by. I'll let you know." She pocketed the phone and looked up at the departures board. Flight 847, Chicago to Atlanta. Boarding at 7 o'clock. Gate 22. She had booked this ticket 6 weeks ago. Not under a corporate alias. Not through her executive assistant with a flag that said, VIP. Handle with care. She had gone online at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, opened the Altitude Air booking portal the same way any passenger would, and purchased one first-class ticket seat 1A in her full legal name, Naomi Adeyemi. Because the whole point was that it had to be real. In the past 3 months, Altitude Air's customer relations department had received 7 formal written complaints from passengers on the Chicago-Atlanta route. 7 different people from different walks of life who had never met each other, who had no coordinated effort, who had each sat down independently and written out what had happened to them because they felt they had no other choice. The complaints shared a pattern. Passengers who did not fit a certain unspoken image of first-class travel. Black travelers, Latino travelers, anyone who dressed casually or traveled alone without the external trappings of wealth, reported being subjected to additional verification requests, cold service, casual condescension, and, in 3 cases, direct confrontation from other passengers, while cabin crew stood by and did nothing. Naomi had read every complaint personally. She had not forwarded them to HR. She had not tasked a director to investigate. She had not issued a memo. She had done what she always did when she needed to understand a problem from the inside out. She put herself in the middle of it. 7 complaints was not a coincidence. It was a pattern. And patterns in an organization she had built from the ground up with her own name on the side of every aircraft were her responsibility. Not to manage from a distance, but to understand face-on eye level. The ticket was for the Tuesday morning flight. She had told no one except Camille, and only Camille because she needed someone who could activate the internal documentation system at the right moment without being physically present. Camille was the only person at Altitude Air who knew the CEO would be sitting in seat 1A of Flight 847 this morning, dressed like any other passenger watching. Naomi walked through the terminal at the measured pace of someone who had been in airports so many times that the crowd had become background. She passed the coffee stand, considered it, decided against it. She passed the newsstand, the currency exchange, the cluster of people crowding around a gate screen trying to read a delayed departure. She moved through all of it without being moved by any of it. At gate 22, she found a seat in the waiting area, set her bag on the floor between her feet, opened her tablet, and waited. She was 40 minutes early. Around her, the gate filled gradually. Business travelers, a family with 2 young children who immediately began rearranging the seating configuration to give themselves more space. A young woman who spread a neck pillow, a blanket, and 3 snacks across the adjacent chair with the focus of someone preparing for a long flight across an ocean. And then 15 minutes before boarding, a man walked into the gate area and sat down in the premium waiting section with the air of someone for whom priority boarding was not a privilege but an expectation. Derek Fowler, 52 Regional Sales Director, Meridian Pharmaceutical Group. He did not look at Naomi. He did not look at anyone in particular. He just sat down, crossed one leg over the other, checked his watch, and began scanning the gate area with the particular expression of a man assessing whether his surroundings were worthy of him. Naomi noticed him the way she noticed everything quietly without reaction, storing the information for use later. She turned back to her tablet. The boarding announcement was 11 minutes away. The gate agent's voice came over the intercom at exactly 7:02 in the morning, cheerful and professional. Altitude Air Flight 847 to Atlanta is now boarding all first-class passengers at Gate 22. Please have your boarding pass ready. Naomi closed her tablet, slid it into her bag, and stood. She joined the small cluster forming at the priority lane. 6 people, maybe 7 rearranging themselves into a loose queue. She took her place near the back, not because she was unsure of herself, but because she was in no hurry and she was watching. Derek Fowler came from the premium waiting area with the stride of a man who believed queue position was a reflection of social standing. He did not rush. Rushing would have implied uncertainty. But he moved with the deliberate pace of someone who expected the crowd to arrange itself around him, and largely it did. Travelers stepped slightly aside without quite knowing why, the way people unconsciously make space for a certain kind of confidence, even when they do not respect the person carrying it. He slotted himself into the line just ahead of Naomi. No acknowledgement, no eye contact, no excuse me. She simply ceased to exist in the space directly behind him the moment he arrived there. Naomi said nothing. From 3 rows of seats away, a young man in a gray hoodie and backpack looked up from his phone and watched. His name was Marcus Webb, 27 years old, a travel content creator based in Chicago with 600,000 subscribers on YouTube and a secondary following on Instagram and other platforms. He had been covering aviation content for 4 years. Airport reviews, airline comparisons, cabin walkthroughs, occasional editorials about passenger experience. He had a trained eye for the mechanics of air travel, including the social mechanics and what he had just seen, the casual, wordless insertion into a space occupied by a black woman, registered in his memory the way irregular patterns always did. He did not reach for his phone yet. He just watched. Behind Naomi in the line, a woman in a sharp blazer and sensible flats shifted her bag to her other shoulder. Rosa Delgado, 38, a civil attorney from Chicago who had been practicing law for 14 years, and had developed over that time an acute sensitivity to the exact texture of what she had just witnessed. She noticed the insertion. She noticed the non-acknowledgement. She filed it. At the gate desk, Priya, 26 years old, a gate agent who had been working this route for 2 years, scanned the line and began preparing for the boarding sequence. She had seen enough of these mornings to know that first-class boarding could go smoothly or it could go poorly, and the difference was almost never about the airline. Derek reached the desk first. He slid his boarding pass forward with the ease of someone who had never once had it questioned. Priya scanned it. Green. She nodded with the professional smile that gate agents develop in their first month on the job and maintain for the rest of their careers. Derek passed through. Naomi stepped forward. She placed her boarding pass on the scanner. The same first-class pass, same flight, same destination. The scanner beeped. Green. Before she could move, a voice came from behind the desk. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to take another look at this." It was not Priya who spoke. It was Tyler Burke, the lead flight attendant, 32 years old, who had come up from the jet bridge at exactly the wrong moment, or, depending on how you looked at it, exactly the right one. He was standing slightly to the side of the gate desk, and he reached across and lifted Naomi's boarding pass from the scanner tray with 2 fingers. He held it up, examined it with the furrowed expression of a man looking for a discrepancy that he had decided must be there. "We're doing additional verification for first-class passengers," he said, not looking at her. Just a routine check. Naomi watched him. The pass already scanned green. I know. He kept looking at the pass. But we've had some assignment issues on this route. I want to make sure the seat is correctly allocated. He had not asked Derek Fowler for additional verification. Derek was already in the jet bridge. Rosa Delgado, standing directly behind Naomi, saw all of this. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying the particular authority of someone who was very accustomed to courtrooms. Her pass scanned green. "What is the basis for additional verification?" Tyler looked at Rosa. "Ma'am, please do not involve yourself in boarding procedures." "I'm a civil attorney," Rosa said pleasantly. "I'm not involving myself. I'm observing." 3 seats away, Marcus Webb had his phone in his hand now. The camera was up. He was not broadcasting yet, just recording locally, gathering footage of a scene that had not yet declared what it was going to become. Priya stood at the gate desk, watching Tyler hold Naomi's boarding pass. She could feel the texture of this moment. She had felt it before on other mornings with other passengers. A weight in the air that told you something was happening that was not in the procedure manual and would not be improved by pretending it was not. She did not speak. Tyler turned the boarding pass over in his hand, and then, after a pause that lasted precisely long enough to be humiliating without being provable, handed it back to Naomi. "You're good, but I'll need to verify your seat assignment when you board." This was not standard procedure. It was invented on the spot. No apology, no explanation, as if the extra 60 seconds of scrutiny had never happened and she should proceed as though it had not. Naomi took her boarding pass back. "Thank you," she said. 2 words delivered with no warmth and no bitterness, clean and flat as a still lake. She moved toward the jet bridge. But Derek Fowler had returned. Nobody had asked him to. Nobody had summoned him. He had walked halfway down the jet bridge, and then, for a reason that was probably instinct more than intention, had come back. Maybe he had forgotten something in the waiting area. Maybe he had simply wanted to see the resolution of what he had set in motion. Whatever the reason, he was standing at the entrance to the boarding lane when Naomi came through, and the expression on his face when he saw her moving freely toward the gate was not neutral. "Still here," he said. It was said lightly, conversationally. The kind of casual cruelty that hides inside a tone that can always later claim it was just a question. Naomi stopped. She looked at him. "Still here," she said. "Interesting." Derek's mouth arranged itself into something that was not quite a smile. He looked her up and down. Jeans, sneakers, small bag. And something in his expression settled into the comfortable certainty of a conclusion already reached. "You know, first class is not really just about buying the ticket." He said this to the air as much as to her, to anyone around him who might want to nod along. "It's about knowing where you belong." Rosa Delgado, coming through the gate behind Naomi, stopped walking. An older gentleman in a tan jacket, 65, white-haired, who had been sitting across the waiting area reading a newspaper for the past 20 minutes and had watched the entire sequence of events, stood up slowly from his chair. "Son," he said, his voice carrying the unhurried authority of someone with nothing to prove, "I suggest you mind your own business and get on the plane." Derek turned to look at him. The older man held his gaze without effort. Derek turned back. He looked at Naomi once more, and in that moment, in that exact moment, he did something that sealed his fate more completely than he could have imagined. He said it again. Louder this time, as if the first delivery had been a rehearsal. "Go back to Africa, where you belong." The terminal did not gasp. It did something quieter and more complete. It went still. The rolling suitcases stopped. The coffee machine was between cycles. Even the departure board above them seemed to pause. Naomi did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She did not give Derek Fowler the reaction he was built for. She looked at him for 3 full seconds, long enough to see him clearly fully without flinching. And then she reached into her jacket pocket, took out her phone, and typed a single message to Camille Torres in Atlanta. It's happening, exactly as the complaints described. Stand by. Camille's reply came back in 4 seconds. Ready when you are. Marcus Webb, still recording from the gate seating area, went live. His caption appeared on screen for 1,200 viewers in the first 30 seconds. Gate 22 at O'Hare. Man just told a black woman to go back to Africa in a first-class boarding lane. She has not moved. Watch this. Naomi pocketed her phone. She looked at Derek Fowler one more time. Move out of my way, she said. He did not move. Rosa Delgado stepped forward. Sir, step aside. 3 other passengers were watching now, some with phones raised, some with nothing but their eyes and the expression of people who were watching history happen and had not decided yet what to do about it. Derek Fowler stood his ground for 1 more second. The older gentleman with the newspaper was on his feet. And then Naomi Adeyemi did something Derek Fowler had not prepared for. She walked past him, not around him, past him. The way you walk past furniture. The way you pass something that is in your way, without granting it the dignity of an obstacle. She stepped into the jet bridge and did not look back. Derek stood at the entrance, watching her go, his finger still half raised, his certainty beginning somewhere very deep to crack. The jet bridge was narrow and quiet, lit by the particular fluorescent calm of a space designed for transition rather than arrival. Naomi walked its length at her usual pace, unhurried, certain, while Tyler Burke fell into step roughly 15 feet behind her. She heard him. She kept walking. Ma'am. She stopped, turned. Tyler was holding a tablet with the crew manifest pulled up, though his eyes were not looking at the screen. They were looking at her, that specific look of someone who has already formed their conclusion and is now gathering language to support it. I want to confirm the seat assignment before you board. We've had a system issue with this flight, and I want to make sure there's no duplication. Naomi looked at the tablet. What's the seat number associated with my booking? Tyler glanced down. It shows 1A. That's my seat. There may be a duplicate. Has any other passenger been asked to stop in this jet bridge for seat confirmation today? Tyler paused. The pause was a second too long. It's a general procedure for... Tyler. She said his name quietly, the way someone says a word they've thought about carefully before speaking. I know you're not doing this for everyone. I know because I watched you wave through the man directly ahead of me without a second glance. I know because the man directly ahead of me just told me in the boarding lane to go back to Africa, and you were standing close enough to hear it and said nothing. She let that sit for a moment. So, when you stop me in this jet bridge for additional verification, we both know what this is. Tyler's jaw tightened. I'm just doing my job. No, Naomi said. You're doing something else, and it's being documented. She held up her phone briefly, not aggressively, just visibly, and then lowered it. She did not explain further. She did not need to. Behind her, the boarding door was still open. She could hear the gate area beyond it. Rosa Delgado's voice carrying sharp and clear. I want the incident so far logged at this gate. I have the timestamp and I have a name. And beyond Rosa's voice faintly, the background noise of Marcus Webb's live stream describing what he was seeing to the viewers now numbering in the mid-thousands. Tyler looked at his tablet. He looked at Naomi. He made the decision that people make when they are cornered by their own behavior and have not yet developed the self-awareness to recognize it. He doubled down. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to wait here while I check with the gate. No. The word landed cleanly. Tyler blinked. Excuse me. I've presented a valid boarding pass that's scanned green. I've given you my name. I'm not waiting here. She moved to step past him. "Scott." Tyler called back toward the aircraft door. "Can you come here for a second?" Scott Navarro, 28 years old, appeared at the aircraft door, a compact young man in the Altitude Air uniform who had been working these routes for 16 months. He looked at Tyler. He looked at Naomi. He saw immediately that something was happening that was not in the service training manual, and his instinct, shaped by 16 months of watching Tyler handle situations with a certain consistent texture, was to stand where Tyler was pointing and let Tyler manage it. He crossed his arms. He said nothing. He did not look at Naomi directly. Naomi looked at Scott for a moment, not unkindly. She recognized his posture for what it was. Not conviction. Habit. "Your lead told you to come stand here," she said. "And you did. I understand that. But if you're asked later what happened this morning, you will have to answer for what you chose to do and what you chose not to do. I'd think carefully about which side of this moment you want to be on." Scott uncrossed his arms. Tyler noticed. "Scott, just stay." Scott stayed, but something in his body language had changed. He was no longer a wall. He was a person standing in an uncomfortable place waiting to see what would happen. Back in the gate area, Rosa Delgado had reached the gate desk. Priya looked up at her. "I want to flag what just happened in this boarding lane as a complaint," Rosa said. "The woman who boarded just before me, Naomi Adeyemi, had a valid boarding pass that scanned green and was stopped twice, once at the desk by the lead attendant and once in the jet bridge. The man who boarded ahead of her received no additional screening. I witnessed the full sequence. I want this documented with a time stamp." Priya stared at her for a moment. She was 26 years old and she had been standing at this desk for 2 years, and she had seen this pattern. She knew its shape and its smell and its texture. But this was the first time in those 2 years that someone had come to the desk and said it out loud and asked her to write it down. She picked up her radio. In the jet bridge, Tyler was still talking. "All I'm asking is for 30 seconds. "You've had 3 minutes, Naomi said. "My boarding pass is valid. My seat is assigned. I'm getting on this plane." She stepped around Tyler. He moved to block her path, not dramatically, not with a raised hand, just a half step to the left that placed his body between her and the aircraft door. It was the kind of move that could always be explained away later as incidental. But Scott Navarro had been watching, and when he saw Tyler's foot move, something resolved in him. He stepped to the side. He moved away from the door. He created a path. "The manifest shows 1. Scott said quietly. He was looking at the floor when he said it, not at Tyler. "I checked it when we boarded. She's on it." Tyler went very still. Naomi walked through the aircraft door. The main cabin of Altitude Air Flight 847 was the kind of space that Naomi knew intimately, not as a passenger, but as the person who had signed off on every design specification, every seat pitch measurement, every overhead bin dimension. She had sat in these seats during prototypes. She had negotiated the leather. She had approved the color of the cabin walls. She had chosen the exact shade of the lighting because she wanted it to feel like early morning in a well-designed living room. She walked through business class without looking at it and stepped into the first-class cabin. 4 seats, 2 on each side. Large, cream-colored, already half-reclined for pre-boarding comfort. The cabin smelled faintly of the cedar air freshener she had selected from a short list of 12 samples in a conference room 3 years ago. She sat down in seat 1A. She opened her tablet. She did not look at the jet bridge door. 45 seconds later, Derek Fowler walked into the first-class cabin, his carry-on rolling behind him. He stopped when he saw her. For exactly 1 second, something passed across his face. Surprise, recalibration, the confusion of a man whose expectation had just failed to match reality. Then he collected himself and moved to seat 2A directly behind her, and sat down with the elaborate casualness of a man pretending he had not just seen something that unsettled him. "Gloria," he said quietly as a woman in a tailored camel coat settled into seat 1C across the aisle. "I filed a complaint at the gate. Gloria Harmon, 47, private investor, Chicago's North Shore," smoothed her coat over her knees and glanced across the aisle at Naomi with the particular expression of someone who had already made a decision. "Good," she said. "Management should sort this out before we push back." Naomi did not look up from her tablet. She sent a message to Camille in seat 1A. "2 passengers adjacent to me already coordinating. Lead flight attendant hostile. 1 junior attendant may be persuadable. Documentation running. Camille. Running since you entered the jet bridge. Every word. Timestamps confirmed." Naomi put her phone face down on the armrest. She looked out the window. On the tarmac below, a baggage cart moved in a slow arc toward the aircraft. A ground crew worker in a yellow vest guided it with hand signals. The runway stretched out beyond the terminal, and beyond the runway the pale gray Chicago sky was beginning to lighten at the edges where it met the horizon. She had watched a lot of skies from a lot of windows. She had watched them from cockpits, and from conference rooms, and from the back seat of hired cars, and from the driver's seat of her own truck at 19 years old, sitting in a parking lot, watching planes take off in the dark, promising herself something she had not fully articulated yet, but already felt in her chest, like a compass needle pointing north. She had kept that promise. Now she was here. In the seat she had paid for on the plane she had built, waiting for the morning to reveal itself. Marcus Webb, back at the gate, spoke into his phone with quiet intensity. His viewer count was climbing, 4,628,000 in the space of 3 minutes. "She's on the plane," he told them. She sat down in 1A. She did not move. She did not argue. She just sat down. He paused, watching the jet bridge. "I don't know who this woman is, but I think we're about to find out." Marcus Webb had been covering aviation content for 4 years, which meant he had spent a considerable portion of his professional life learning to read the invisible structures of air travel, not just the mechanics of flights and seats and schedules, but the social architecture of who was treated how by whom and why. He had documented upgrade denials, inconsistent security screening patterns. First-class passengers being addressed differently based on how they were dressed. He had made a career out of noticing the things that airlines preferred passengers not to compare. What he had just watched at Gate 22 was not ambiguous. He was live now, standing back from the boarding door camera, steady, keeping his voice low and consistent. "Just to be clear for everyone watching," he said, "I saw that woman's boarding pass scan green at the desk. I watched the lead flight attendant come up from the jet bridge and take her pass back for so-called additional verification. The man who boarded right before her, the one who then told her to go back to Africa in the boarding lane, his pass was not held for additional verification. He walked through without a second look. The comment section scrolled rapidly. That's profiling. Who is she? Where's airport security? Someone needs to call the airline. 8,400 of you watching right now," Marcus continued, "and the flight has not even pushed back yet." Rosa Delgado appeared at his elbow, not because she had sought him out, but because they were both standing in the same corner of the gate area, both watching the same entrance, both with the same expression of focused attention. She looked at his phone screen, looked at him, did not say anything for a moment. Then, "You got the moment he told her to go back to Africa, from the jump," Marcus said. Rosa nodded slowly. "Good. You know her?" Marcus asked. "No," Rosa said. "But it does not matter who she is. That's the point." She turned back to the boarding door with the expression of someone who had spent 14 years arguing precisely that point in courtrooms and had not yet grown tired of it. The boarding lane was quieter now. Most passengers had made it through. The older gentleman with the newspaper, whom nobody had caught a name from and who had subsequently boarded without volunteering one, had gone through after Naomi carrying his folded paper under his arm like a document. 2 flight attendants from a different airline waiting to deadhead to Atlanta had watched the entire sequence from the coffee cart 20 feet away. They spoke quietly to each other now with the knowing look of people who recognized the pattern even across company uniforms. Priya was at her desk. She had logged the complaint Rosa had filed, time-stamped formal with Naomi's name and seat number. She had relayed it over the radio to the gate supervisor on duty. The supervisor had said, "Copy that," and had not, in the 60 seconds since, taken any visible action. Priya looked at the boarding door. She looked at her desk. She looked at the radio in her hand. She put the radio down. She would carry this moment with her for a long time, the weight of what she had not said when she could have said it. Marcus shifted his angle, tracking the boarding door, still narrating. Flight 847 to Atlanta. Altitude air. We're at about 12,000 viewers right now. The woman is on the plane. She sat down in her seat, and she did not move. The man who told her to go back to Africa is also on the plane. In 2A filed a complaint according to what I just heard. And nothing has been done. He paused. The hashtag is Altitude Air 847. If you want this seen, share it right now. Within 6 minutes, the hashtag was trending in Chicago. Back at the gate, the boarding door was nearly sealed. Scott Navarro was inside. Tyler Burke was inside. Derek Fowler and Gloria Harmon were inside. And Naomi Adeyemi, who had sat down in seat 1A and opened her tablet and was waiting with the patience of someone who understood precisely what was coming, was inside. Marcus lowered the camera for a moment. Rosa was still beside him. "You know what gets me," she said, not to Marcus, specifically just to the air. He said it out loud, in public, in a terminal full of people, and his expectation, his actual genuine expectation, was that she would leave. "He's used to it working," Marcus said. "That's the part that should concern everyone," Rosa said, "that it has worked, enough times that it was still his first instinct." She looked at the boarding door. "She did not leave," Marcus said. "No," Rosa said. "She did not." She picked up her own bag. Her flight, a different gate, a different airline, was boarding in 20 minutes. She had stayed here longer than she needed to, watching a scene that was not her scene, except in every way that mattered. "Make sure people see that part too," she said. "That she did not leave." "I will," Marcus said. Rosa Delgado walked away toward Gate 18 without looking back. Marcus looked at his phone. 14,000 viewers. Comments rolling in so fast the screen was nearly unreadable. "We're going to stay with this story," he said into the camera. "Wherever it goes, Flight 847, O'Hare to Atlanta, and the woman who did not move." He found a seat near the window, settled in, and pointed the camera at the tarmac where Flight 847 was still at the gate, door-sealed engines beginning their pre-departure warm-up, and waited. Inside the jet bridge, in the 60 seconds between Tyler stepping aside and Naomi entering the aircraft, something happened that nobody in the first-class cabin witnessed, but that was recorded by the jet bridge intercom system. A system that Naomi had personally approved during the airline's redesign 3 years ago, not because she anticipated this morning specifically, but because she believed that accountability required documentation, and documentation required infrastructure. Derek Fowler had followed Naomi into the jet bridge. He had told himself he was simply proceeding to board. He had told himself he just happened to be walking behind her. But the truth that his body knew even if his mind had not admitted it yet, was that he had come back because the scene at the gate had not resolved the way it was supposed to, and something in him needed it to resolve. "Tyler," he said, catching up to the flight attendant who was still standing in the jet bridge after his exchange with Naomi. "What happened?" Is she staying in 1? Tyler looked at Derek. The manifest shows her in 1A, sir. Derek's expression shifted. I don't understand why that's still an issue. I don't think it is an issue. I called ahead from the lounge, Derek said. I spoke to a gate supervisor. I explained the situation. This woman got in line ahead of me. She's clearly in the wrong section, and nobody seems to be doing anything about it. Tyler looked at him. Sir, her boarding pass is valid. Her seat is confirmed. There is not... I want to speak to the captain, Derek said. I'm sorry. The captain. I want to speak to whoever is flying this plane. Tyler's expression went carefully neutral. The captain is completing pre-flight checks. She is not available for passenger consultations before departure. Derek stared at him. Captain Adeyemi is in command of this flight. There was a pause. Derek's eyes moved quickly to the aircraft door. Back to Tyler. Something shifted in his face. A barely perceptible recalibration, a tiny reorganization of assumptions that he pushed away before it could become a question. Then, I want the issue with seat 1. A escalated before we push back, he said. That's a reasonable request from a premium passenger. I'll note your concern, Tyler said. The phrase had the texture of nothing, the institutional equivalent of a shrug. Derek walked onto the aircraft. He settled into seat 2A with the particular studied casualness of someone performing composure. He adjusted the seat. He ordered a pre-departure water from Scott Navarro, who brought it without speaking. He checked his phone. Messages, emails, the morning market numbers. And then, because he had the particular gift of a man who had spent 20 years in sales, which is to say the gift of never letting a loss feel final, he pivoted. Gloria Harmon was in 1C. Gloria, he said low, I filed a complaint at the gate. They're looking into it. Gloria looked at him over the rim of her reading glasses. Good. I don't understand why this is taking so long. Neither do I. I'll be leaving a review, Gloria said in the tone of someone who considered a bad review equivalent to a declaration of war. I've been flying altitude air for 3 years. This is not the standard I've come to expect. Agreed. The woman in 1A. Doesn't belong there, Derek finished. Gloria looked across the aisle at the back of Naomi's head, at the neat, natural hair, the navy blazer collar, the small gold pin catching the cabin light. There's a standard, she said. That's all I'm saying. There is a standard. Naomi, 2 feet away, heard every word. She did not move, did not shift, did not give any signal that she had heard anything at all. She was reading something on her tablet, or appeared to be reading, and her stillness was so complete that both Derek and Gloria apparently convinced themselves she had not heard. She had heard. She stored it the way she stored everything that needed to be stored cleanly, precisely, without letting it touch the part of her that would make her react before she was ready. Tyler Burke came through the first-class cabin with the pre-departure check moving efficiently. Overhead bins, tray tables, seat backs. When he reached Naomi's row, he paused. It was the smallest possible pause, barely half a second. But Naomi caught it. She looked up at him. He looked at her. Then he looked away and continued down the aisle. Tyler, Derek said, Before we push back, sir, we're preparing for departure. I just want to confirm. The seat assignments have been verified. Tyler said, his voice carrying the specific neutrality of someone who had made a decision and was now reciting it. Everyone is in their assigned seat. We'll be pushing back in approximately 10 minutes. Derek sat back. His jaw was tight. In the seat behind and beside him, the woman in seat 3A, whose name was Jess 31, an urban planner who traveled frequently for work and had been watching this entire sequence with growing discomfort, looked at the back of Derek's head, and then at the back of Naomi's head, and then at her phone. She opened her messages and typed to a friend. On a plane, and something is happening. The woman in 1A is black-dressed casually, totally calm. Man behind her has been making comments since the gate. Told her to go back to Africa. Woman next to him agreeing. 2 flight attendants seem to be siding with the complainers, but she has not moved. She has not said a word since she sat down. I don't know who she is, but I cannot look away. Her friend typed back, "Is someone filming?" Jess looked around the cabin. She typed back, "Yes, I think so, from outside." She put her phone down, looked at the back of Naomi's head again. I hope you don't move, she thought. And then, because she was the kind of person who believed that a thought meant to support someone should be said out loud, I hope you don't move. She said it quietly, no louder than a murmur. Naomi did not turn around. But she said I won't. The words were flat and certain as a closing argument. Scott Navarro, passing back through the cabin, heard the exchange. He looked at Naomi. He looked at Tyler's back halfway up the aisle. He looked at Derek, who was staring at his phone. He looked at Gloria, who was examining her nails. He thought about what Naomi had said to him in the jet bridge. I'd think carefully about which side of this moment you want to be on. He kept walking. But something in him was turning over slowly like a stone being lifted to look at what was underneath. The aircraft door sealed. The jet bridge retracted. Naomi Adeyemi looked out the window and sent one final message to Camille. We're about to push back. 12 minutes. Then I'll need you to activate the full protocol documentation and send me the internal log confirmation. Camille. Standing by. Everything is running. You've got this. Naomi set the phone on her armrest. Outside, the ground crew disconnected the pushback vehicle. The engines began their warm-up sequence. A low building note that Naomi had always loved, not because it was beautiful exactly, but because it was the sound of what she had built preparing to do what it was built to do. She closed her eyes for 3 seconds. Then she opened them and looked straight ahead. Altitude Air. Flight 847 began its taxi at 7:31 in the morning, pulling away from Gate 22 with the deliberate pace of a plane finding its place in the queue. The first-class cabin had settled into the particular quiet of a confined space where people are pretending not to be aware of each other. Jess, in seat 3A, had her eyes on her book but had not turned a page. Derek was looking at his phone with the concentration of a man studying for a test he had not known about. Naomi was watching the terminal slide past the window as the aircraft moved. Gloria Harmon was the one who spoke. "Excuse me." She said it pleasantly in the way that people say things pleasantly when pleasantness is the coating on something that is not pleasant at all. She was looking across the aisle at Naomi. "I just want to make sure you're comfortable. Sometimes the gate agents make mistakes with the seat assignments and passengers end up in sections that—" "I'm in my assigned seat," Naomi said. She did not look up from the window. Of course, of course." Gloria smiled the smile of someone whose entire diplomatic repertoire existed to deliver the same message with different wrapping. "I've just been flying Altitude Air for a long time, and I do think first class works best when everyone is on the same page about the experience." The experience, Naomi repeated. The standard. The expectation. "I understand," Naomi said. And then she turned her head and looked at Gloria directly. Not aggressively, not with heat, just with complete and level attention. "You're wondering if I belong here?" Gloria opened her mouth. "You do not need to wonder," Naomi said. "I'm in the seat I booked. That's all the answer you'll need." She turned back to the window. Gloria looked at Derek. Derek looked at Gloria. Something passed between them. The compressed communication of 2 people who had decided they were allies before they had fully verified what they were allied about. I just think Derek said loud enough that there was no pretense of privacy that some of the decisions this airline has been making about who qualifies for premium service are worth examining. It's not about race. It's about standards. It's never about race, Jess said from seat 3A, not loudly but clearly. It never is, until you look at who it keeps happening to. Derek turned to look at her. I don't believe I was addressing you. No, Jess said. But I'm here. Tyler Burke, moving through the cabin for the pre-flight service run, looked at the tension in the first-class section and made the decision that people make when they are tired or afraid, or have already made one bad decision that morning and are looking for the path of least resistance. He addressed Derek. Sir, can I get you something before takeoff? Sparkling water orange juice. What I'd like, Derek said, is for someone in an official capacity to address the situation in this cabin. The cabin is prepared for departure, sir. That's not what I'm asking. I understand. Is there something specific I can help you with? Derek looked at Naomi's back, then at Tyler. Handle the seat issue. Tyler looked at Naomi. Naomi looked out the window. Scott Navarro was watching from the galley doorway. He had been watching for most of this exchange. His hands were in his jacket pockets, and his expression was the expression of someone who was starting to understand that standing by and doing nothing was itself a choice, and that choices had a way of becoming permanent. He thought again about the jet bridge, about what Naomi had said. Which side of this moment do you want to be on? Tyler moved toward Naomi's row. He stopped beside it. Ma'am. Tyler. Naomi's voice was quiet. If you finish that sentence in the way I think you're going to finish it, this will be a very different conversation than the one you're imagining. Tyler stopped. My seat is 1A. My name is in the manifest. My boarding pass is scanned and logged. If you ask me to move, you will need to explain, in writing with documentation to the company, why you asked me to move. And I want you to think carefully about what that explanation is going to look like. Tyler stood beside her for 2 seconds. 3. 4. Then he turned and walked back to the galley. Derek made a sound. Not quite a word, not quite a sigh. Something dismissive and sour designed to be heard. Some people, Gloria said to no one in particular, just do not know how to read a room. Naomi picked up her phone. She looked at it. She thought for a moment. Then she typed to Camille full escalation. Everything that's happened in this cabin since boarding is already running, Camille. Every word since you stepped into the jet bridge. Audio cabin camera log timestamps on every interaction. Tyler Burke has been identified and flagged 3 times. Derek Fowler is fully documented from the gate. Gloria Harmon. Do you want her included? Naomi? Yes. Camille. Done. Naomi put the phone in her pocket. She looked out the window. The runway was approaching. The engines were building. In 3 minutes, this aircraft was going to lift off, and at some point, at exactly the right point, everything Derek Fowler and Gloria Harmon and Tyler Burke believed about this morning was going to reorganize itself into something they had not seen coming. But not yet. Naomi sat in her seat, watched the ground fall away beneath her, and let them have their moment just a little longer. The wheels left the runway at 7:48 in the morning. Naomi watched the ground pull away, the tarmac shrinking, the terminal becoming a toy building, the city of Chicago spreading out below in its vast gray grid. She had watched this particular separation more times than she could count, from different windows, different altitudes, different lives, but it never became ordinary. The moment when something as heavy as an aircraft refuses to stay on the ground, refuses to be bound, was one of the things she had never been able to fully explain to people who had not experienced it from the inside. She settled back in her seat, and in the white noise of the climbing aircraft, she let her mind go where it had been trying to go since the moment in the boarding lane. She was 19 years old. It was a Tuesday, which she remembered not because it was a significant day, but because it was the day her father worked a double shift and could not be reached, and she had wanted very badly to tell him something. She had just aced her first solo simulator examination at Cornerstone Flight Academy in Houston. The only woman in her group, the only black person in her class, and the only person who had scored a perfect performance record in the preliminary assessment. Her instructor, a man named Connolly, who had 20 years of commercial aviation experience and had probably been a good pilot, had called her into his office with the furrowed expression of someone who had received news they found difficult. He had her test results spread across his desk. He looked at them the way someone looks at a result that does not match their expectations. "Carter," he said. He kept using her father's surname, though she had introduced herself twice with her own. "You've got the hands for this. I won't pretend otherwise. Your scores are very good." She had waited. She already knew there was a but. There is always a but. "But this industry has an image," he said. "The carriers have a certain look they're trying to maintain. The cockpit is a trust relationship with passengers. And passengers—" He paused. "Well, they have certain expectations." He had not finished the sentence. He had not needed to. She understood every word he had not said. She had been understanding those words in one form or another since she was 8 years old. The particular fluency of knowing exactly what someone means when they say something else entirely. She had thanked him. She had stood up. She had walked to her car in the parking lot of Cornerstone Flight Academy, and she had driven 3 blocks to an empty lot near an airstrip, and she had sat in her car in the dark and watched planes cross the sky, and cried until there was nothing left to cry. She did not cry for long. She was not built for long crying. By the time the sun rose, something had happened in her chest that she later described to Camille, the only person she had ever told this story to directly, as a kind of hardening. Not the brittle kind, the kind that cracks under pressure. The other kind, the kind that gets forged. She went back the next morning. She sat in the same seat. She flew better than she had the day before. She was 31. She was a pilot, fully licensed, fully certified, 1,000 hours logged. She was flying as first officer for a regional carrier on the Charlotte-Atlanta run, and she was standing at the gate in full uniform, 4 bars on her shoulders, hat under her arm, flight bag in hand, when a passenger approached her. A man in his 60s, well-dressed, the kind of man who had been flying business class for 30 years and had developed strong opinions about how the world should be arranged. He looked at her. He looked at her uniform. He looked at her face. "Excuse me," he said. "Can you tell me where the pilot is?" She had looked at him. "Steady, clear. You're looking at her." He had stood there for 10 seconds. She counted them. He did not say anything. He did not apologize. He did not acknowledge that he had been wrong. He simply turned and walked toward the gate with the particular bearing of a man rearranging his internal furniture in a room he did not want to admit had been renovated. She carried those 10 seconds with her for a long time. Not because they hurt her. They did. But that was not what she carried. She carried them because they were precise. They were exact. They told her exactly what she was dealing with, and exactness was always more useful than ambiguity. She was 36. She was sitting in a conference room in Atlanta in front of a whiteboard covered in flight route projections and financial models. Across the table were 4 venture capital partners from a firm that had 3 months prior expressed tremendous interest in her proposal for a new regional airline with a zero-discrimination operating model built into every layer of the organization. They had spent 90 minutes finding reasons it would not work. The market is not there. The operating costs do not pencil. The value proposition is too niche. She had answered every objection with data, with comparative analysis, with market research, with every number they had asked for, prepared, precise, documented. In the end, the partner who had done most of the talking had leaned back in his chair and said almost gently, "Naomi, who is your target market really? Who are you building this for?" She had looked at him for a moment. "People who are tired of being made to feel like they do not belong," she had said. "That's who I'm building this for." He had nodded slowly. A condescending nod. The kind that says, "I hear you, but I do not believe you." "That's a very niche market," he said. "No," she said. "It's the largest market that has never been properly served." They had passed. She had found other investors, smaller ones, people who had been dismissed from rooms themselves. She had built Altitude Air from $2.3 million in seed funding, a single leased aircraft, and 4 employees. 8 years later, she had a fleet of 11 aircraft, 600 employees, and a profitability record that the same venture capital firm had tried twice to acquire. She had declined both times. Now she was sitting in seat 1A. Behind her, Derek Fowler was adjusting his seat. Gloria Harmon was reading something on her phone. Tyler Burke was moving through the galley. Scott Navarro was looking out the window. She could feel their presence the way you feel heat, without needing to look. She thought about the 19-year-old in the parking lot watching the planes. She thought about the 10 seconds at the Charlotte gate. She thought about the venture capital conference room. She thought about the 7 complaints she had read at her desk in Atlanta, each one written by a different person who had sat in a seat on this route and been made to feel that they had gotten there by accident. All of those moments, every single one, had brought her here, to this seat, on this morning, on this flight. She was not angry. She was clear. There is a difference, and it matters. Anger moves like a wave, powerful but spent in a moment. Clarity moves like water finding its level, patient, unstoppable, capable of reshaping everything it touches over time. Naomi Adeyemi had learned the difference young and had spent 25 years choosing the latter. She looked out the window. The clouds were below them now, white and flat, stretching to the horizon. She sent a message to Camille 12 minutes to switch. "Get Whitfield ready." Camille. "He's been ready since 6 a.m. His words. Naomi smiled. "Just slightly. Tell him I'll be there in 12 minutes. The cabin had reached cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign chimed off. 2 passengers in the rear section reclined immediately. A flight attendant from the economy cabin made her way forward with a question for Scott Navarro about a meal allotment. The ordinary machinery of a flight in progress. Tyler Burke came through the first-class cabin with the breakfast service menu, a small laminated card-heavy stock, the kind of detail that Naomi had insisted on because she believed the texture of the materials you handed to people communicated something about how you regarded them. He placed one on Jess's tray table, one for Gloria, one for Derek. He passed Naomi's row without placing one. The omission was precise. It was not an accident. It was the kind of thing that could always be explained. I thought she was sleeping. I was going to come back. I must have miscounted. The architecture of small cruelties is always built with plausible exits. Naomi watched him continue up the aisle. She picked up her phone, opened the direct line to Camille. "Tyler Burke just skipped my row on the menu service," she typed. "Log it with timestamp." Camille logged. 8:14 a.m. cabin service record. "I'm adding it to the incident file. Do you want me to activate the full protocol Naomi package now?" Naomi looked at the closed cockpit door. 14 minutes had passed since takeoff. Not yet, she typed. 2 more minutes. She put the phone down. Derek Fowler had been watching her. Not continuously. He looked away whenever she might turn, but in the peripheral way that people watch things they are both drawn to and unsettled by. He had noted that she still had not moved, that the flight attendant had not made her move, that the cabin crew's attempts to manage the situation had produced so far nothing. This had not happened to Derek before. Not exactly like this. He was accustomed to a certain sequence of events. He said what he said. People arranged themselves accordingly. The world reorganized to match his expectations. That was the sequence, and it had worked for 52 years with remarkable consistency. The sequence was not working. Tyler Derrick said as the lead flight attendant passed back through. "I want to raise something again." "Sir, we're in service." "I understand. I want to formally request that the passenger in 1A be moved to an alternative first-class seat for the remainder of the flight, or, if no first-class seat is available, that her booking be reviewed." The cabin went quieter. Not completely. The engine noise continued, and a passenger in the rear was having a conversation. But in first class, the particular attention that had been running as an undercurrent since boarding surfaced fully. Jess, in seat 3A, put down her book. On what basis, Naomi said. She had not raised her voice. She had not turned around. She addressed the question to the window and let it carry. Derrick said, "I don't believe I was speaking to you." "You were speaking about me," Naomi said. "In a cabin I'm sitting in. On a flight I'm on. So you were speaking to me." She turned around then fully and looked at Derek Fowler across the seat back with the expression of someone who had been waiting for a very long time for the right moment and had just received confirmation that this was it. "You told me to go back to Africa," she said. "In a boarding lane in front of 60 people at 7 in the morning. Then you followed me into the jet bridge and tried to have me removed. Then you sat behind me and spent the climb to altitude coordinating with the passenger across the aisle about how to continue applying pressure." She paused. "All of this has been documented. The gate recording, the jet bridge audio, the cabin log. My assistant in Atlanta has been running a parallel documentation system since I sent the first message from the gate." Another pause. Every word. Derek stared at her. Gloria had gone very still. Tyler Burke was standing at the forward end of the cabin holding the service tray not moving. "Who are you?" Derek said. The question came out smaller than he intended. "I'm the passenger in seat 1A, Naomi said. "That's who I am right now, and that should have been enough." She turned back to the front. She picked up her phone, typed 2 words to Camille. "Activate it." Camille's response came in 8 seconds. "Done. Protocol. Naomi is live. Full cabin documentation confirmed. Internal compliance team notified. Archive running board alert sent. Captain Whitfield has received his update. He says," and I'm quoting, "he says, tell her it's about time." His words. Naomi looked at the cockpit door. She stood up. She reached into the overhead compartment and retrieved her small garment bag, the one that had been there since she boarded the one that nobody had looked at twice. She took it down, held it against her side. "Where are you going?" Derek said. His voice had a different quality now. The question of a man who had started very slowly, very uncomfortably, to sense that there was information he was missing, and that the information was going to matter. "Forward," Naomi said. She moved to the front of the cabin. Tyler Burke was still standing at the galley entrance. He saw her coming. He looked at the garment bag. He looked at her face. And something, some combination of what she had said about documentation and the look on her face and whatever instinct had survived the morning's decisions, made him step aside. She walked past him. She stepped through the galley. She reached the cockpit door. Captain Adeyemi said Scott Navarro from behind her. He said it quietly. He said it the way a person says a title they have just understood they should have been using all along. Naomi knocked twice on the cockpit door, not because she needed to ask permission, but because she believed in the ritual of it, the procedural integrity of knocking on the door you were about to walk through. She had always believed that. The door opened. Captain James Whitfield, 55 years old, silver-haired, with the calm, unhurried expression of a man who had been flying for 30 years and had heard everything and been surprised by almost nothing, looked out at her with the particular warmth of a colleague who had been waiting. "About time," he said. "I know," she said. She stepped inside. In the first-class cabin, the cockpit door closed behind her. The cabin was silent for a moment. not the silence of emptiness, the silence of a room full of people processing something that had not yet declared its full meaning. Derek Fowler looked at the closed cockpit door. He looked at Gloria. He looked at Tyler Burke, who had moved to the galley entrance and was standing there with the expression of someone who had just begun to understand the shape of their mistake. "What was in that bag?" Gloria said. Nobody answered. Jess in seat 3. A looked at her phone. She had typed a message earlier to her friend. She went to the front. There was a bag. "I think—" She paused. She finished the message. "I think I know who she is." She sent it. And then, because she believed that the right moment to say something out loud was when it was true, she said it to no one in particular, and everyone at once. She owns this airline. The first-class cabin of Altitude Air Flight 847 had never been quite this quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a smooth flight with contented passengers. The other kind. The silence that accumulates when people are holding their breath without knowing they are holding it, waiting for something to resolve in one direction or another. Derek Fowler looked at the cockpit door for a long moment. Then he looked at his hands. Then he reached for his water glass and took a deliberate, composed sip that was, if you watched it carefully, slightly less composed than he intended. "She's gone," Gloria said. "Whatever she was, whatever she thought she was doing. She's gone." "She went to talk to the crew," Derek said. "Exactly. She went to complain. Which she has every right to do, I suppose." Gloria arranged herself more comfortably in her seat, the small adjustments of a woman reinstating her sense of order. "And they'll take the complaint and file it somewhere, and that will be the end of it." "Right," Derek said. He did not sound entirely convinced. "You were within your rights," Gloria said. "You had a legitimate concern about the premium experience. You raised it through the appropriate channels. Whatever happens next, you followed the process." Derek nodded. He looked at the cockpit door again. He looked at the empty seat. 1A, the table folded down, the window shade half raised, the small leather bag gone from the overhead bin. "She had a garment bag," he said. "Lots of people travel with garment bags. In the overhead bin." She took it with her. Gloria looked at him. So Derek did not answer. He reached for his phone. He was not entirely sure what he was looking for. He typed into the search bar Naomi Adeyemi. He saw the results. He read the first line. He read it again. He put the phone face down on the armrest. "Gloria," he said. His voice was different. The quality had changed. The way a note changes when the string producing it is suddenly under more tension. "What the captain of this flight?" He stopped. "Her name. What about her name?" "Tyler said her name when I asked about the captain in the jet bridge. Before boarding. He said Captain Adeyemi." Gloria looked at him, then looked at the cockpit door, then back at him. "That's—" "The same name," Derek said. The silence that followed was different from the previous silence, denser, with more weight to it. Tyler Burke had moved from the galley to the forward section where he was performing tasks with concentrated attention, repositioning service materials, reviewing the menu cards. The behavior of a man who has decided that focused industry is the best available defense against the awareness of what is happening around him. Scott Navarro was in the rear galley, but he had been in the forward section 60 seconds ago. He had heard the exchange between Derek and Gloria. He had heard every word of it. He took out his phone and looked at something on the screen. His own search result pulled up before Derek's because Scott Navarro had put the name together 3 minutes earlier than Derek had, and had spent those 3 minutes making peace with what it meant about the morning he had just participated in. Naomi Adeyemi, CEO and founder Altitude Air, named one of Forbes' 100 most powerful women in business. Former commercial pilot, 3,200 flight hours logged. First black woman to found and operate a major U.S. regional carrier. There was a photograph. A professional headshot. Navy blazer, calm expression, eyes steady and direct. The same eyes that had looked at him in the jet bridge this morning and said I'd think carefully about which side of this moment you want to be on. Scott put his phone in his pocket. He walked back through the cabin without looking at Derek or Gloria. He stopped at Tyler's side in the forward section and said very quietly, "You need to know something." Tyler looked at him. "What?" Scott told him. Tyler went still. Not for a second, not for two. For a full 5 seconds, which in the particular arithmetic of a pressurized cabin at 35,000 feet felt like much longer. He looked at the cockpit door. He looked at his tablet with its crew manifest and its passenger documentation and its neat log of the morning's service decisions. He looked at the record of what he had done. "Are you sure he said?" "I looked it up," Scott said. "Yes." Tyler set his tablet down on the galley counter. He was silent. In seat 3A, Jess had her phone in her lap. Her friend had replied, "Wait, the CEO of Altitude Air." "The airline." Jess typed back, "Yes, that's who just walked into the cockpit." She looked up at the closed door. She looked at Derek, who was staring at his phone with the particular stillness of someone whose understanding of their morning had just been completely reorganized by 4 lines of search results. And she thought, this is the part where it turns. Whatever happened before, all of it, this is where it turns. She was right. At 35,000 feet, the certainties that sustain a certain kind of man begin under the right pressure to show their seams. Derek Fowler had spent the past 20 minutes doing what he did best, managing a narrative. He had told himself a story about this morning, a legitimate concern about premium service standards, a complaint properly filed and outcome pending. He had told Gloria this story, and she had accepted it, which was the way things usually worked. He had told it to Tyler Burke, and Tyler had largely gone along with it, which was also usually how things worked. But now he had 4 lines of a search result sitting on the screen of his phone face down on his armrest, and the story was becoming difficult to maintain. He picked up the phone again. "Naomi Adeyemi," he read. "CEO and founder of Altitude Air since 2017. Former first officer and captain for 2 regional carriers, 2003 to 2015. Received her instrument rating at 19. Named to the FAA's Advisory Board on Passenger Equity in Commercial Aviation 2022. Recipient of the National Aviation Excellence Award 2023. He scrolled. Adeyemi has spoken extensively about her decision to build Altitude Air from scratch after years of encountering barriers in the aviation industry both as a pilot and as a passenger. In a 2022 interview, she described the founding principle of the airline. Every person who boards one of our aircraft should feel that they are expected. Not tolerated. Expected. He stopped reading. He set the phone down again. "The woman I told to go back to Africa," he said. He said it quietly. Not to Gloria, not to anyone. Just aloud to the air, as if hearing it in his own voice might make it more or less real than it was. Gloria had gone quiet. She was looking at something on her own phone now, and whatever she was reading had produced a similar quality of stillness. Derek looked at the cockpit door. He had called the gate supervisor before boarding and filed a complaint about a passenger he described as inappropriately placed in the first-class cabin. He had told Tyler Burke in the jet bridge to handle the seat issue. He had told Gloria that he had filed a complaint and that management would sort it out. He had in the space of 45 minutes complained about the CEO of the airline to the airline's own staff. He thought about the post he had published 20 minutes into the flight. He reached for his phone with hands that were slightly less steady than usual and opened the app. The post read, "Disappointed by the declining standards in premium air travel." Had an uncomfortable experience this morning with boarding procedures that frankly compromised the quality of the first-class experience. Companies need to understand that their premium customers are their core constituency and that policies need to reflect that. More on this. It had 43 likes. And in the comments section, a growing volume of replies that were not the validation he had been expecting. Sir, this is just embarrassing. Is this the altitude air flight? Because I'm watching a live stream from the gate right now. The man who told a black woman to go back to Africa is now posting content about standards. Sir, does your company know you're posting this altitude air? 847 is trending in Chicago and Atlanta, said the next comment with a screenshot attached. He closed the app. He opened another one. He searched the hashtag. The first post was from Marcus Webb, 27 minutes old, with 81,000 impressions. The woman this man told to go back to Africa at gate 22 is now in the cockpit of the plane he's sitting on. Altitude Air Flight 847. This is not a drill. There was video attached. Gate footage. Boarding lane footage. Derek's voice. His actual voice, not paraphrased, not reconstructed. Saying the words he had said. Clear. Unmistakable. Time-stamped. He watched 6 seconds of it. He put his phone in his pocket. He was very still. Gloria looked at him. Derek, don't, he said. I think we should. Please, don't. She pressed her lips together. She looked out the window at the cloud layer 35,000 feet below them. Tyler Burke came back through the first-class cabin. He moved with the particular deliberateness of someone trying very hard to appear normal while managing an abnormal internal experience. He refilled Gloria's water without being asked. He adjusted the temperature setting on the console between rows 1 and 2. He did not look at either of them directly. Tyler Derek said, Sir, is she actually? Yes, Tyler said. He said it simply, without embellishment. Just the one word which was all that was required. Derek was quiet for a moment. I want to. There's nothing I can do for you right now, sir, Tyler said. He said it with a professionalism that had none of the accommodation of the previous version. Not rude, not hostile, but completely, finally neutral. I suggest you sit back. He continued up the aisle. Jess in seat 3A had been watching this exchange. She looked at Derek's profile, his jaw, his hands, the phone he kept picking up and putting back down. She thought about the boarding lane. She thought about what he had said. She thought about Naomi standing at the gate and not moving, not shrinking, not giving him the reaction he had come there to extract. Did you know Jess asked him? She said it without anger, just the plain question. Derek looked at her. When you said what you said to her at the gate, Jess said, did you know she owned the airline? A pause. No. Would it have made a difference? He did not answer. That's the question, Jess said. Is it not? She turned back to her book. She did not need his answer. The fact that he had not given one was already more honest than anything else he had said this morning. Scott Navarro appeared at the galley entrance. He looked at Derek. He looked at Jess. He looked at the cockpit door. He took a slow breath. He picked up the intercom handset. He held it for a moment. Then he set it back down without using it. Because there was nothing left to do. Whatever was coming was already in motion, and had been since the moment Naomi Adeyemi had walked through the aircraft door and sat in seat 1A, and looked out the window with the calm expression of someone who had been here before, in every way that mattered, and knew exactly how this ended. The aircraft flew on. Smooth air, clear skies. 32 minutes to Atlanta. The intercom chimed at 8:41 in the morning. The sound was the standard double tone that preceded captain announcements on every commercial aircraft. 2 clean notes, brief and professional. But in the first-class cabin of Flight 847, that sound produced a different effect than usual. It did not fade into background awareness the way intercom tones usually do. It pulled everyone forward. Jess looked up from her book. Gloria looked up from the window. Derek stopped mid-motion, his hand halfway to his water glass, and went still. Then the voice came. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking." A woman's voice, warm, professional, carrying the particular quality of calm authority that experienced pilots develop. Not loudness, not sharpness, but a resonance that says, "I am in charge of this aircraft, and everything is fine. And I have done this thousands of times, and I will get you there. We're currently cruising at 35,000 feet with clear skies ahead. Our flight time to Atlanta is approximately 50 minutes, and we're expecting a smooth descent. The weather in Atlanta this morning is 71 degrees and sunny. Flight attendants, please proceed with the service run at your convenience." The intercom chimed again twice and fell silent. In the first-class cabin, nobody spoke for a moment. Derek had put his water glass down. He was looking at the intercom panel above his seat, the small speaker grill, the call button, the reading light control, with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle they already know the answer to and are hoping very much they are wrong about. He had heard the voice. He had heard it, and his brain had done what brains do when they receive information they are not prepared for. It had presented the recognition slowly like a translation taking place, each element matching to a previous element until the whole picture became undeniable. He knew that voice, not from before this morning. He had never met this woman before this morning. He knew that voice from 45 minutes ago, from the boarding lane, from the jet bridge, from the two words, "Move out of my way," that had come out level and quiet, and had contained, he now realized, more authority per syllable than anything he had said all morning at full volume. He reached for his phone. He searched the name he had already searched once, but this time he was not looking at the professional biography. He was looking at the photographs. He was looking for something recent. He found it in a 2023 Features article. A photograph of Naomi Adeyemi in her captain's uniform standing on the tarmac beside an Altitude Air aircraft. 4 gold stripes on her shoulders. The same steady expression. The same eyes. The same face that had stood in the boarding lane and not moved. He put the phone down. His hands were trembling slightly. Not much, barely visible, but enough that he noticed them and pressed them flat against his thighs. "That's her," he said. He said it to no one. He said it to the cabin. Gloria did not respond. "That's her," he said again. She's flying the plane." The intercom chimed again. The same double tone. "This is Captain Adeyemi again." A brief pause. Not dramatic, just the natural pause of someone making a considered statement. "I want to take a moment to remind all passengers that Altitude Air operates under a zero-tolerance policy for harassment and disrespectful behavior toward any member of our crew or fellow passengers. This policy applies from the moment you enter the boarding lane to the moment you exit the aircraft. Interactions occurring during this period are subject to documentation and review." Another pause. "We appreciate your cooperation. Enjoy the remainder of your flight." The intercom closed. Jess in seat 3A was looking at the speaker above her. A slow, full smile had spread across her face. The smile of someone watching something unfold exactly as it should. She said nothing. Tyler Burke stood in the galley entrance. He had been there for the duration of the announcement. He had not moved. He was staring at the floor in front of him with the expression of someone doing arithmetic they already know the answer to and do not particularly want to confirm. Scott Navarro was in the rear galley. He had heard the announcement through the cabin speakers. He put down the coffee carafe he had been holding and sat down in the jump seat and looked at the ceiling. "Oh," he said quietly. Just that. "Oh." the single syllable of a man whose entire understanding of the morning had just rearranged itself into something clear and irreversible. Derek Fowler stared at the cockpit door. He was not comfortable. He had not been comfortable since his first search, but now something had moved into a different register entirely. Not the discomfort of surprise, but the discomfort of consequence, which is a very different and much heavier thing. He thought about the boarding lane. He thought about his voice and what it had carried and how many people had heard it. He thought about his phone face down on his knee, and the search results he could not unread, and the post that had stopped getting likes and started getting something else entirely. He thought about the voice on the intercom. Captain Adeyemi, the captain of the aircraft he was sitting in, the owner of the airline whose logo was on the seat back in front of him, the woman he had told to go back to Africa at 7 in the morning in a terminal full of witnesses. Gloria looked at him. "Derek," she said, "when we land?" "I know," he said. "You're going to need to—" "I know," he said again. He looked out the window. The clouds below them were thinning. Through the gaps he could see the green patchwork of Georgia farmland 35,000 feet below. The same land, the same country, the same Tuesday morning, but reorganized now into something that looked from up here exactly the same as it always had. He was the one who had changed. Not the landscape. Him. And that was the part that was going to be very difficult to explain to the people who were going to ask him to explain it. 28 minutes to Atlanta. The cockpit door opened. Naomi Adeyemi stepped into the first-class cabin of her own aircraft wearing the uniform she had earned before she had any employees, before she had any investors, before she had anything except a license, a logbook, and a refusal to accept what she had been told about where she belonged. 4 gold stripes on her shoulders, the silver captain's wings above her left breast pocket, the altitude air crest on her cap. She was carrying her cap in her left hand, and her right hand was at her side, and she moved through the galley entrance into the cabin with the measured pace of someone who had been in this space 1,000 times, as architect, as inspector, as decision-maker, and now as this, as the person standing in the cabin she had built, while the people who had dismissed her were sitting in the seats she had designed. Captain James Whitfield stood in the cockpit doorway behind her. He crossed his arms and leaned against the frame and watched, not as a supervisor, not as a witness, as a colleague who had spent this morning watching his captain handle something with a composure he had rarely seen in 3 decades of flying, and who wanted to be present when it concluded. The first-class cabin went completely silent. Jess's book dropped slightly in her hands. Gloria looked up, looked at the uniform, looked at the face above it, and for 3 full seconds simply processed. Derek Fowler saw her. He had known she was coming, in the way you know something is coming when the logic of events makes it inevitable. But knowing and seeing are different things, and what he saw when Naomi Adeyemi stepped into the first-class cabin was something he had not prepared himself for, not because she was impressive though she was, but because she looked exactly the same as she had in the boarding lane, the same steady eyes, the same level chin, the same complete, unassailable calm. She had not changed in order to confront him. She had simply put on the uniform she was entitled to wear. She stopped beside the forward rows. She looked at Derek. She looked at Gloria. She looked at Tyler Burke standing in the galley, who looked back at her with the expression of a man who had arrived at an accounting. She did not raise her voice. The cabin was quiet enough that she did not need to. "Mr. Fowler." Derek's jaw worked. No sound came out. "I believe you had something you wanted to say earlier," Naomi said. The sentence sat in the cabin air. Everyone heard the layers in it. Everyone understood what the layers were. Derek opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He said. "I did not know who you were." Naomi looked at him for a moment. "That's the point," she said. 3 words. The cabin absorbed them. She looked at Tyler Burke. You asked me to leave my seat. You stopped me in the jet bridge. You skipped my row in the service run. Each item delivered cleanly without heat. None of that was policy. All of it is documented. Tyler said, Captain, I'm not asking for an explanation right now, Naomi said. I'm telling you what happened so you understand that it is known. She looked at him steadily. We'll have a full conversation when we're on the ground. But you should know before we land that everything you did this morning was recorded time-stamped and is already in the hands of our compliance team in Atlanta. Tyler Burke said nothing. His face was very still. Naomi looked at Gloria. You asked me if I was sure I was in the right section. She let the sentence breathe. I built this section. Jess, in seat 3. A pressed her lips together. Her eyes were bright. Naomi looked at the cabin, the full sweep of it, not just the front rows. She looked at Scott Navarro in the galley entrance, who held her gaze with the expression of someone who had arrived at a difficult truth and accepted it. She looked at Jess. She looked at the woman in seat 4B who had her phone half raised. She looked at the elderly man in seat 3B who had not said a word since boarding and was watching her now with the attentive expression of someone who had seen a great deal of history and recognized that he was looking at more. Every person on this aircraft paid to be here, Naomi said to the cabin, not loudly. She never needed volume, but fully. Every single one. The man in the back who bought his ticket on a sale 3 weeks ago. The woman in 1C who has been flying first class for 20 years. And the passenger in 1A who boarded with a valid pass and was stopped for additional verification while the man behind her walked through without a second look. She turned back to Derek. You told me to go back to Africa. A pause. The engines were the only sound, while standing in line to board a plane I own. Another pause, shorter, that I am currently flying. The final pause was the longest, long enough for each of those 3 sentences to land separately in sequence, each one adding its weight to the previous one. That I built. The silence after that was absolute. Gloria Harmon was looking at her hands. Derek Fowler was looking at Naomi, and in his expression was something that was not quite shame. Shame requires self-awareness, and Derek was still in the early stages of developing it. But was the precursor to it the recognition of wrongness before the ability to fully name it? I didn't mean, he started. Naomi raised her hand slightly. Not dramatically, just the quiet gesture of someone who has heard this sentence too many times to let it proceed. You did mean, she said, and the record shows what you meant in your own voice in front of 60 people. She looked at him for 3 more seconds. Long enough. Then she looked away, not dismissively, but with the complete authority of someone who has said what needed to be said and does not need the other person's response to validate it. Captain Whitfield is going to complete the descent and landing, she said to the cabin generally. We'll be in Atlanta in approximately 25 minutes. I'd ask everyone to fasten their seatbelts. She turned back toward the cockpit, and then she stopped. She turned back once more and looked at the entire cabin. Not just the first class section, but through it as if she could see the full length of the aircraft and all its passengers. The next time you decide who belongs somewhere, she said, make sure you know whose name is on the door. She turned and walked back to the cockpit. Captain Whitfield stepped aside to let her through. The door closed. For 8 full seconds, nobody in the first-class cabin moved. Nobody spoke. The engine noise, ever present and constant, was the only sound in the world. And then the applause began. It started in the rear. Someone in economy who had heard the intercom announcements and understood enough of what was happening to understand all of it. And it spread forward, row by row, moving through the aircraft the way something moves when it is true, without anyone deciding to start it, without anyone deciding to join, just the spontaneous and collective recognition that something just and correct had occurred. First class was the last to join, but Jess was first in seat 3. Her book closed on her lap, both hands coming together with the unhurried certainty of someone who had been waiting to do this. Derek Fowler sat in his seat. He did not applaud. He stared at the cockpit door. Gloria Harmon did not applaud either. She looked out the window at the Georgia landscape beginning to appear below. Tyler Burke in the galley heard the applause. He stood very still. He was going to carry the sound of it and what it meant about his own choices for a long time. The aircraft banked gently south, beginning its descent into Atlanta. 24 minutes to landing. The applause lasted longer than applause usually does. It was not the polite applause of a smooth landing. It was the other kind. The kind that comes from something that has been building pressure since before anyone got on the plane, finding its release. It rolled through the aircraft like a wave that had traveled a long distance before reaching shore. Jess clapped until her palms were warm. The woman in seat 4B had tears on her face, which she made no attempt to conceal, which was the right decision. Scott Navarro stood in the galley and did not join the applause, but he held his hands at his sides and looked at the floor with the expression of a man deciding something about himself that would take some time to fully articulate. And then it faded, as things do, back into the white noise of the engines and the gentle shudder of a descending aircraft and the ordinary sounds of a Tuesday morning flight proceeding toward its destination. The cockpit intercom chimed. "This is Captain Adeyemi. We're beginning our initial descent into Atlanta. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival. Passengers, please ensure your seatbacks are in the upright position and your tray tables are stowed. We'll be on the ground in approximately 20 minutes. Professional. Calm. Unhurried." Exactly as she always sounded. Derek Fowler listened to that voice and felt the full weight of the morning settle over him in a way that no amount of corporate language or professional positioning was going to be able to lift. He thought about the boarding lane, about his certainty, his absolute casual, unexamined certainty that this woman did not belong ahead of him. He thought about how that certainty had felt, how natural it had been, how it had required no thought, no evidence, no examination, just the immediate and reflexive verdict of a man who had been practicing that verdict in one form or another for 52 years. He thought about what it meant that it had required no thought. That was the part that was going to follow him out of this aircraft, not the consequences. The consequences were going to be what they were going to be, and he was beginning to understand that they would be significant. But the thought that had required no thought. The certainty that had been so complete, it had never once asked him for a reason. Tyler. Tyler Burke appeared at his row. He looked at Derek with the careful neutrality of someone who had recently changed their position and was still recalibrating. "I want to apologize," Derek said. Tyler looked at him for a moment. "Sir." "Not to you," Derek said. "I know. I meant..." He gestured toward the cockpit door. "I want to apologize to her. When we land, is there a way to..." "Captain Adeyemi manages her own schedule," Tyler said. "I can pass the request. Please do." Tyler nodded once and moved away. Gloria was watching Derek from seat 1C with an expression that had moved a long distance from its morning starting point. She no longer looked like an ally. She looked like a woman recalculating an investment that had not performed as expected. "I may have been..." she started. "Don't," Derek said, not harshly, just with the exhaustion of a man who had used up his available supply of public confidence for the morning. "I'm just saying..." "I know what you're saying," Derek said. "I'm saying it to myself." Jess in seat 3. Overheard this exchange. She looked at her book. She did not say anything because she had already said what she had to say, and there was nothing left that needed adding. Scott Navarro moved through the first-class cabin performing the arrival checks. Tray tables, seat backs, overhead bins. When he reached Naomi's seat, 1A still empty, the overhead bin closed the window shade raised. He paused. He opened the overhead bin. He checked that it was secure. He closed it again. He thought about what she had said to him in the jet bridge. Which side of this moment do you want to be on? He had not chosen well this morning. He knew that. He had chosen the side of convenience and habit and institutional loyalty to someone who had not deserved it, and in doing so he had participated in something that he was going to need to account for. But there was still time. Not to undo it because you could not undo what had already happened, but to decide what came next. That much was still available to him. He moved to the next row. The aircraft continued its descent. Through the windows on the left side, Atlanta was becoming visible. The city spreading out in its grid, the downtown towers catching the late morning light, the runways visible in the distance. 20 minutes condensed into 5, then into 2. The intercom chimed once more. "Cabin crew, please be seated for landing." The aircraft touched down at 9:23 in the morning. A landing so smooth it produced a brief, involuntary silence of appreciation before the engines reversed and the brakes took hold. A landing that said as cleanly as anything said in the cabin that morning, "I know what I'm doing. I always have." The applause began again, not as long this time, but just as real. The aircraft came to rest at Gate 7 of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport at 9:31 in the morning. Before the jet bridge had fully extended, Jess had her phone out and was reading the Altitude Air 847 hashtag. Marcus Webb's stream had accumulated over 90,000 views. The top post had been shared 22,000 times. The boarding lane footage, Derek's voice, clear and unmistakable, 6 words time-stamped, was attached to every third share. "She's the CEO," one post read with a screenshot of Naomi's profile. She founded the airline, she built it, and she was flying the plane while he was sitting in 2A figuring that out. The replies to that post had broken past 40,000. When the cabin door opened and passengers began to deplane, 2 things happened simultaneously: the ordinary flow of passengers gathering bags and shuffling toward the exit, and something less ordinary. A particular awareness in the jet bridge of people who understood they had just been part of something that did not end at the gate. Derek Fowler moved slowly. His carry-on felt heavier than it had at O'Hare. His phone was in his pocket, face-down, notifications vibrating in steady sequence. He had not looked at it since he put it away over Illinois. At the gate, 2 Altitude Air compliance officers in dark uniforms were waiting. Not aggressively. They stood to the side, professional and quiet. But they were there, and they had a specific quality of presence that communicated clearly enough. One of them said, "Mr. Fowler, if you could come with us, please." Derek looked at them. He looked back at the jet bridge. He looked at his phone. "Yes," he said. "All right." He went with them. Gloria Harmon was asked separately to step aside and provide a formal statement as a witness to the events on the flight. She did this with the careful composure of someone acutely aware that whatever she said was going to become a document. Tyler Burke and Scott Navarro were both asked to remain at the gate for the compliance team's initial debrief. Tyler sat down in the gate seating area with his tablet on his knees and waited. Scott sat 2 seats away. They did not speak to each other. The consequences that followed were not slow in coming. Meridian Pharmaceutical Group issued a statement 18 hours after landing. Derek Fowler had been placed on immediate unpaid administrative leave pending a full review of his conduct. His post, the one about declining standards in premium air travel, had been screenshot and shared 400,000 times and was referenced in every news article about the incident. Forensic evidence of irony preserved in his own words. He resigned from Meridian 3 weeks later before the review could conclude, and the company accepted the resignation with a statement that described his behavior as inconsistent with their organizational values. Tyler Burke was terminated after a formal investigation confirmed that he had engaged in discriminatory service practices, skipping Naomi's row, participating in Derek's escalation, failing to act on Rosa Delgado's gate complaint, The investigation also noted that this was not the first complaint filed against him on this route, which meant the pattern was older than this morning and deeper. Scott Navarro was placed on mandatory retraining. He requested the assignment himself before it was required. An email to the compliance team at 2 a.m. the night of the flight that read, "I should have spoken up sooner. I'd like to understand how to do this better. I'm requesting the full retraining program." That email was later read in full by Naomi. She forwarded it to Camille with a single note. This one might be worth keeping. Altitude Air's bookings increased 38% in the week following the incident. Not because of the publicity. Naomi said that in every interview she gave, which were not many and were brief, but because people had seen something real. They had seen an organization built on a principle being tested at its foundations, and they had seen the principle hold. None of that was what Naomi thought about that evening. She sat in her office in Atlanta at 9:14 p.m., the city lights spread below the window, the runway visible in the distance where aircraft were still arriving and departing in their patient, continuous rhythm. She had changed out of her uniform and was in jeans and a gray sweatshirt, her feet on the desk, a cold cup of coffee on the side table that she kept meaning to throw away, and kept not throwing away because it gave her hands something to reach for when she needed to think. She was scrolling through her phone, not the news coverage, not the social media, but her direct messages. There were hundreds. She was not going to read all of them. But she was reading some. One stopped her. It was from an account she did not recognize. The profile photo was a teenage girl, 16, maybe 17, in a school uniform. The message read, "My name is Zara. I'm 16. I've wanted to be a pilot since I was 8, but my school counselor told me last year that it was not a realistic path for someone like me." I did not know what to say back to her. I watched what you did today, and I still do not know what to say to her. But I wanted to say something to you. Thank you. I'm going to figure out the rest. Naomi read the message 3 times. She typed back Zara. Your counselor was wrong. It is realistic. Start with ground school. You can begin online right now tonight before anything else. Do not wait. And when you get your first solo, tell me. She sent it. She put the phone down on the desk. Outside, through the floor-to-ceiling window, an Altitude Air aircraft was taxiing out toward the runway. Its navigation lights blinking in the night, its engines warming to the tone she had always loved. She watched it move down the taxiway with the slow, deliberate certainty of something preparing to become something else. She thought about a parking lot in Houston, a 19-year-old in a car watching this exact same thing from a different window in a different city, in a different life that was also the same life. She had made a promise in that parking lot, not out loud. She had never told anyone the exact words of it, not even Camille, not even her mother. But she knew what it had been. It had not been about success. It had not been about proving anything to anyone in particular. It had been simpler and larger than either of those things. It had been, I will build something where the door is open. She watched the aircraft reach the threshold, pause, then begin its run. The nose lifted, the wheels left the ground, the lights climbed into the dark Atlanta sky steady and certain until they were just 2 points among thousands, indistinguishable from all the other aircraft that had taken off tonight and from all the stars beyond them. Naomi watched until she could not see it anymore. She picked up her cold coffee. She took a sip. She made a face at the temperature and set it back down. She looked at the message from Zara one more time. When you get your first solo, tell me. She put the phone in her pocket and stood up. She turned off the desk lamp. She walked to the door of her office and paused with her hand on the frame, looking back once at the window and the city beyond it, at the airport and the runways and the sky that she had built a company to inhabit, that she had fought for in parking lots and flight schools and conference rooms and boarding lanes. She turned off the light. Some people build walls to keep others out. Naomi Adeyemi built wings. This is a fictional story created for entertainment and inspiration. All characters' events, companies, and incidents depicted are entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real persons living or dead or actual events is purely coincidental. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you believe that dignity should never have to prove itself, hit that like button right now and subscribe to the channel. We tell these stories because they matter, and because the world gets a little better every time someone decides not to move. Drop your city in the comments below. We want to hear from every corner of this community. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never let anyone tell you that you do not belong.